You're listening to Fish Out of Water, the podcast where feeling out of place becomes the start of something new. Dive in with us. Let's explore stories, insights, and real conversations that help you swim forward with purpose. Welcome back to Fish Out of Water, Episode 5, Swimming in Circles. Does loyalty keep you stuck?
Does it? It's a question that I think a lot of people don't necessarily think of, because loyalty is one of those things that really keeps you in a place of safety to a certain extent. I think even in saying this, I'm like, okay, let's back up a second. Before we even get into the fullness of this episode, Bret, I think that we need to really define what loyalty is, or in the context of how we're going to be talking about it today, right?
Yeah.
And because it's important, because, for folks in our generation and older, loyalty has been a big thing, in companies and relationships and so on. But we're talking about loyalty versus alignment, right? I think you had a really good definition for alignment. And if we talk about that first and then come to loyalty, it'll make a little bit of sense. Do you want to share that?
I think that when we talk about the idea of alignment, it has to originate from within ourselves. That the core idea is to finding the centrality of who we are, where we move out from that towards those that are in our circle. And I think that the idea of loyalty isn't obedience. It's partnership. It's collaboration. It's the ability to kind of pull back a little bit and make sure that we're viewing everything. We're not just simply participating ad hoc, so to speak.
Yeah. And so when we go to loyalty, it has this sense of nobleness, nobility, right? Because, you've got this guy's back, or vice versa, they've got your back. And like, no matter what, you're in this together, your ride or die friends. And, when you're talking about change happening in you, in your life, around you, loyalty sometimes can be at odds with what's going on, right? And when we're talking about alignment, you said there's stuff that happens on the inside of you, and alignment is more when you're coming in line with somebody. That's not to say that you agree with everything that you say. It's not saying that you're going to back up everything that's said or done, so much as it is, let's figure this out together. So you talked about collaboration as well, right? Loyalty tends to be this is, I have to back this person up no matter what, even if you don't agree with it. And there's danger in that, right? That really puts pressure on that safe space, in certain ways, especially if you're the one at odds with what's going on, right? So, when we're talking about like loyalty versus alignment, right? We have things that may happen in our life that challenge our beliefs or value system in that long-term relationship, right? And so you become at odds with, do I maintain what's happening here, or is this something that I need to move away from? And that's a really hard question to ask, let alone answer, when you're talking about loyalty with people in your life that mean something to you, right?
Yeah.
And so we talked very briefly about this yesterday, actually, and you were talking about the 4 A's, that I thought was a really simple way of looking at the difference between alignment versus loyalty. Do you want to go through those?
For sure. So I think that when we look at a top-down context or scenario, We essentially see the very top, the highest level of authority is where loyalty kind of is established. That if you are submissive to authority, then you are identified as loyal. And then if we are identified as loyal, we are ultimately accountable to whatever that authority context or structure is. And then from that accountability, we receive the affirmation. We then are ultimately accepted as a member of the society, of the community, of whatever structure that is and exists. Where I think that alignment is more about us pursuing that same list, but in the opposite direction. That rather than seeking authority, we should be seeking acceptance. And
Hmm.
it's not that I'm looking for acceptance, I'm bringing acceptance into this emergent group, this emergent culture, society, and however small or however large those might be, I'm bringing that acceptance. And the acceptance is ultimately identified through affirmation. And when we look at our toolbox, we look at the relational assessment as being the entry point of that affirmation.
Hmm.
How am I going to affirm you? Is it
Hmm.
empowering words? Is it intentional presence? Is it meaningful tokens? Is it right? And so as we
Yeah.
begin to break these down, this is where this acceptance and affirmation exists. And this is where the magic happens. Because when we become that type of person, people give back accountability.
Hmm.
And then authority is never abused. Authority is never forced upon, and it can be broken apart if it at any point becomes unhealthy.
Hmm.
It's not something that we're trapped in, which is I think the theme that we're looking for when we talk about loyalty and alignment. A lot of us in my history anyways, I felt very trapped because I was trying to be loyal, but I had very limited freedoms to be me.
Hmm.
There was
Yeah.
always an expectation on, oh wait, no, Bret, you can't be that loud. No, Bret, you can't be that dot dot dot. And and that was usually because somebody else was either I don't I think it's hard to say they were intimidated by me. I'm a big person in a small room. There's no doubt about that.
Hmm.
Um, but I think the caution becomes when our loyalty is, oh, here's a great word that just popped into my head, becomes um like false humility.
Yeah. I mean, what's popping into my head too, because that it kind of relates to what you're saying with that false humility, but um, I'm just trying to find how it's like alignment allows things. It allows
Mhm.
authority. It allows you to be you. And when we're talking about authority too, we're not talking about like who's higher and who's lower and the
Mhm.
subservient and whatever. We're just talking about like people have authority to speak into your life. You listen to what they say because what their words, the words they bring, have weight in your life. So with alignment is that there's an allowance for things because of all of those other steps being
Mhm.
met, in terms of the acceptance and the affirmation and so on. And, when I look at coaching, um, for me, one of the things that really stood out to me when I started to really consider coaching, when I learned about what it was, I got a little bit of training and started to dabble in it a little bit just at the very beginning. It was this whole thing of like people let me not so much speak into their life so much as it is they let me into their life because they would share
Mhm.
things just randomly. And as I started to become more comfortable with coaching and got my certification and so on, I started looking around and like, geez, people let me in all the time. And
Mhm.
all I do is ask questions, and they're not. invasive questions, because it totally give the way that I try to ask questions, that is like, you can answer as much or as little as you want with the questions that I'm asking, but they just, answer the question, take it to the next level. And, that's one of the things that coaching, I think serves one of the purposes it serves is it helps you to bring people, relationships, ideas, all of this stuff into alignment in who you already are.
Mm,
Because you're learning who you are, in terms of learning more about the depths of who you are and your core competencies and core temperament and how you are fueled, coming to a place where you're accepting of yourself, right? And
mhm,
as you start to operate in that and you're starting to recognize, geez, I'm being affirmed left, right, and center because I'm being myself. And I'm becoming more comfortable with affirming and accepting others because now I'm understanding you're different because of this and I'm different of this, but we get to celebrate this together. It
mhm.
makes some things a lot easier as you go through those processes, right? So,
And I think that is one of the really most fascinating words that we've kind of really titled in on for this episode, at least, is celebration.
yeah,
Is that when we talk about how not all relationships age well, that
yeah, yeah, yeah.
the idea of, and one of these key ingredients of maybe when it's time to consider how do we expand the circle that we're in, or even just simply full out leave the one we're currently inhabiting, is, am I being celebrated? Am I being cheered on? We in the global sports activities, we have this practice that we do whenever we're doing leadership stuff. And we'll do like rock, paper, scissors. We do thumb wars. We do a bunch of these little fun games. And the way that it works is no one is eliminated. Your role changes.
Mm.
So everybody starts with the first round, rock, paper, scissors. And if you become beaten, you then immediately become that person's cheerleader.
Oh.
So now it becomes, there's this dual role. So your job then is to now become the cheerleader of the person that has beaten you.
Yeah, that's
It's hard, right?
I was gonna say, man, you just lost and now you have to cheer somebody else on. Some people that's gonna
Yep.
irk, right?
But
But
what
it's
we
a go ahead.
Yeah, and
You're
so
gonna say
the
exactly what I was gonna
practice,
say. Go ahead.
yeah, and so then the practice becomes this alignment context. It becomes, how are we building out the function of relationship,
Mm-hmm.
the idea of, and we've talked to our kids throughout their young romantic dating years as, are you a slingshot or are you an anchor?
Mm-hmm.
Are you holding somebody back from their future, or are you propelling them into the future that they believe that they're called to operate in?
Yeah. I mean, this comes right back to what we were talking about in the last episode with the window and mirror test, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Who are those people in your life from the mirror test who are just affirming who you were, not who you're becoming. Whereas the window test is, they're seeing you where you're at now, but they're able to cheer you on to where they see that you're trying to go to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're looking at long-term friends, when we're looking at colleagues or mentors, when we're going through change, who are those people who are alongside you, cheering you on and celebrating you, but are also challenging you to consider the things that you may not have been considering? And that challenging is not a feeling like you're hitting a brick wall every time, so much as it
Mm-hmm.
is, they get you to stop and think for a second of like, oh, I didn't consider that. That's a good point. Let me think on this for a second. And maybe you think on it and you come back and you're like, no, I still want to go in that direction. Hey, that's your decision to be made. But how are they now stepping in, even if they think that you're doing the wrong thing? And it's not about them being yes people. Let's be very clear on that. It is a matter of, hey, I've given you my 2 cents. We've talked about this. I see that you've thought about it, but you still want to go in this direction. Hey, that's fine. I said what I needed to say, but we can keep going, right? That's not a yes person because they said something that they knew was opposed to what you were already thinking or doing or whatever the
Mhm.
situation is called for, right? And I think that is something that is really um it's a simplified model of what the relationship can actually look like, because here you are
Mhm.
sitting at dinner with your family and you're having great conversation, blah blah blah, and then your dad or your brother turns to you and says, oh, how's the job hunting going, or like, are you getting
Mhm.
out of that job you're in or whatever. you know, in that moment, maybe you're not feeling so great because it's not going so well, but are you able to talk about it with them? Are they actually encouraging you, or are they putting you down? Like, those are the
Mhm.
things that you've got to look at in terms of your growth, in terms of your how you're being fueled. If you're not feeling fueled, it's have those conversations. They don't always feel good, but they're necessary because it brings
Mhm.
those people, or at least gives those people an opportunity to um see things from your perspective, whether they agree
Mhm.
or not. And when there's healthy conversation, you feel heard, you feel seen. And even if there's
Mhm.
not agreement at the end of it, you still feel heard and seen, which is important,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So, yeah. So for the course that we've put together, Unshakable You, we have some really cool insights for people that we teach on, um, related to relational posturing and so on. Can you kind of take a quick dive into some of this as it relates to what we're talking about here with loyalty versus alignment?
Well, and I love the question because I think that what we often get lost in the midst of is the pursuit of clarity, which is this word that we've been kind of touching on surfacely across all of our
Yeah.
episodes. And I think having for you and I to have a more intentional focus on how how is unshakable you, how is in being empowered ultimately drawing people towards clarity. I
Yes.
think that the healthiest version of loyalty comes when we are loyal to who we are first. And so being unshakable, being truly rooted is being able to clearly articulate I am dot dot dot. And being in a position in that knowing, now I know who's celebrating me and I know who's not celebrating me. I
Mm-hmm.
know who's really taking from me and not giving back.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that as we kind of look towards this redefinition, I don't think we throw loyalty in the trash. I think
No.
loyalty is still a very important component
Yep.
because when we are truly rooted in ourselves, so we have the relational assessment where we begin to identify more clearly understand, there's the clarity touch that when we get to this place we say, listen, I thrive when I receive this.
Mm-hmm.
And then we ask the question, I'm seeing you thrive when I do this.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Yep.
that correct? Because now we're not guessing. And I think that most of the circles that we're swimming in are often guesswork, or they're nothing more than a mirror. They're the same. And the ingredients of sameness don't generally lead to freedom. They don't generally lead to thriving.
Mm-hmm.
It is when my wife encourages me. So I'm an empowering words, and I'm a kind of a service oriented heart.
Mm-hmm.
And so this will sound strange. My wife and I, we were in the midst of this big fight. It was one of those like big fights, and she was like, "How do I love you?" And I said, "When you're doing the laundry and you're putting my socks away, turn them inside right." Like it was that simple.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't this or this. It was my socks. Because as a service oriented heart, it's the tiniest, littlest thing that means the world to me.
Mm-hmm.
My wife is quality time and touch.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's being intentional with my presence. It's coming alongside her,
Yeah.
putting my phone away, putting my game away, putting my computer away, canceling a meeting if it's necessary, and making sure that it's not just time with her, it's intentionality.
Hmm.
I'm coming to be with you. And the physical touch, making sure I'm bringing that as best as
Hmm.
I possibly can.
It removes, I mean, as I'm hearing you talk this, it removes that element of false humility. You said this just a few minutes ago, but when you think about who you are in the presence of others, when you know who you are and what your superpowers are, just to use
Mhm.
those terms, um, and you know who the person is that you're in, like whose presence you're in, there's kind of a dichotomy, even just as you were explaining it, where you have your love language that you like to receive in, but also how you want to give it in, because that's how you show your love. However, that's not the same as your wife, right?
Mhm.
And you talked about being intentional. And, um, you know, false humility is one of these things that I think that as a society we don't talk enough about because, for some of us, it's really easy to fall into patterns where you just do things because they're the thing to do, even though that's not your superpower. They're just, you just do it because you need to do it. Or, we think of false humility, I think, in our society where, people are given praise and they're like, oh no, it wasn't a big deal, whatever. But false humility is more than that. It's not just, you know, you know, acting humble when in fact in your head you're like, oh my gosh, yes, it was so amazing. Um, it's
Well,
almost,
there's a trick there. There's a trick there.
yeah,
That false humility is when you are trying to be perceived as humble in order to intentionally receive something.
yeah,
That
yeah,
I think is where that seed is planted in what can I get out of this and how do I get it?
yeah. So on the flip side of that, I think, we have this tendency of thinking like, if I did something or I said something and you came back, you're like, oh my gosh, that's so amazing. And I respond to you, I'm like, yeah, that was amazing. It was so cool. We have some people who would be on the fence of like, was that being humble or was that, you know, bragging or whatever? When in the moment, I'm just excited as you are that that came out of my mouth, whether it was planned or
Yes, yeah,
not, right? So I'm celebrating with you. And that's not false humility because that's
not at
being
all.
exactly who you are, right?
Which I think is and the idea of humility existing when I am genuinely acceptant of who I am.
Hmm.
So I come back to the I am dot 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 statement. It's the ability to say, yeah, I am a big voice in a small room. Yes,
Hmm.
I am.
Hmm.
But that doesn't mean I'm there to do harm. It just means I'm a big voice in a small room.
Not even whether you're there to do harm so much as you're not there to be loud. You just happen to be loud. It's a
Mhm.
totally different way of looking at it, right? Um, and that doesn't just because you're loud doesn't mean that like you're loud to be heard. You're just loud because that's who
Mhm.
you are, right?
Yeah.
It's such a small thing. All right, so I feel like we're getting off track here with alignment and loyalty, right? So in our course, when we're talking about the relational posturing and so on, which you were talking a little bit about, in terms of being intentional with how you love your wife and so on, um, understanding your fuels is such a huge part of
Mhm.
um, understanding how or being able to recognize how you are able to move forward in situations that seem hard, difficult,
Mhm.
and even when they're not difficult, it's still something of like, well, how come it's so easy for me to do this, but it's so difficult for this person to do it, right? Or vice
Mhm.
versa. How come it's so easy for them to do this, and in this, moment, like I can't do this? And understanding who we are and how we're motivated, how we're fueled, what our values are, All of those things come together to empower us to move forward, even in times of great stress. And we don't
Mhm.
have to be worried about loyalty in those moments because we've spent the time learning who we are. We've spent the time learning who the people are around us, and there's been alignment happening. And so when the times are tough, you're not worried about how someone's going to respond because even if they don't
Mhm.
respond the way that you expect them to, there is a foundation for that relationship to have those conversations that are needed in the
Mhm.
moment so that you can then move forward to the next step
Mhm.
together, whether you agree or not, but you still can
Yeah.
have healthy communication, right?
And when we break down this whole course, the goal is to honor our history best by not reliving it.
Yeah. Yeah,
That,
absolutely.
to the play on words, swimming in the same circle. Well, are you actually swimming in a circle? Like, there's a problem too. And I think that the idea of ensuring that we are finding people that are not just simply duplicating what I do really well. I'm not afraid of a louder voice than me in a smaller room.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not afraid of that,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm more than willing to be the voice if the room doesn't have one.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the knowing and the ability to make sure that we are in the space we fit,
Yeah.
that there doesn't need to be two of me in a space. My word, no one needs to have two of me at the same time.
Oh, dear
But that
Lord. Just joking.
when we think about the strength, right? But in order for my strength to and your strength
Yeah.
to, we must be able to communicate the gaps, which may be a default of the unshakable component. Is we're not only here to help you learn what you do really, really well, we want to be able to help you go,
Yeah.
oh, I shouldn't be doing that because I'm just pouring water into a bucket with a hole in the bottom of it. I'm
Yeah.
not actually applying any value because
Yeah.
I'm never going to be great at X,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And that's for a later episode for sure that we're going to be talking about that hole in the bucket. Um, I think, just to wrap things up here, I think it's really important that we always take time to evaluate who we have in our life.
Hmm.
Um, whether things are going good, whether things are going bad, whether change is happening, whether it's not, it's a healthy practice because it removes you from that autonomic behavior as opposed
Hmm.
to being purpose driven. A lot of people today, I think, struggle with this idea of like, what's my purpose? What am I here for? Um, and because of it, they're experiencing burnout. They're experiencing breakdowns in their relationships, whether it's marriage or friendship or whatever, and they're just not figuring out, they can't figure out like what it is that is creating these holes, if you will. And so, I just want to leave this question for everyone today is like, who's in your life today? How do those relationships align with who you are and where you're going? What purpose or value do they bring to your life? And that's for you to answer,
Hmm.
whatever that is, whether it's just like they're my rock, they're my diehard, like they just get me. There's a place for those people in your life. Then there's some people who just they seem to grate on you all the time. But is there a purpose for them in your life in terms of where you are right now, whether it's career or everyday life? And so I'll leave you with that and just want to thank you all for joining us today on this episode. We're on episode 5 with for Fish Out of Water. And we just hope that you guys have an amazing day. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Talk soon.